Hi there, and welcome to a new geometry nodes tutorial. Today we are making this fractal node tree shape, and it can also grow and it looks very cool. This node group uses one of my favorite new nodes. It's called the shortest edge path node. And I'm also going to learn you a trick on how to do proper branching like this, so that whenever you are doing any kind of branches in geometry nodes, things won't intersect each other and forks in branches will actually look good. More of that at the very end. We're first going to start with the shape itself. If you want to skip this tutorial and get a dedicated node group with a lot of control, you can go to my Gumroad, it will be available there. And if you get the Neuron fractal node in the months of January or February of this year, you will also get the mushroom node that I've made previously. Anyways, let's get into it. So first we're going to start in a new file of Blender. Let's delete the default cube and add a plane. We're going to go into edit mode and size it by 1/2 so the plane is 1 by 1. And we are basically going to create a 3D grid. Let's do that by subdividing the mesh. I'm going to subdivide it 15 times so it has a resolution of 16. Next I'm going to select everything and press Alt M because we have to split the faces by edges. This is important because we're going to extrude it up and we actually want the inside to get extruded as well, and we don't want it to be hollow on the inside. So let's do just that. We're going to press E to extrude it, and we're going to extrude it by 1/16 on the Z axis. And we're going to extrude it 15 more times, which is very easy. We just press Shift R a bunch of times, which repeats our last action. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. There we go. So we now have a 1 by 1 grid, which is also filled on the inside. This is very important. And finally, we want to delete the top layer of faces. We can do that by going into orthographic mode, pressing X gray and going to the face view and just selecting the faces like this and deleting them. We're going to delete only the faces. There we go. This is our base shape for the Neuron fractal. The idea is that we start right over here, right in the middle of the bottom layer. And then we're going to pick some points at the top of this mesh. And it's going to grow towards that. Let's pull up our tab here and go to the Geometry Nodes tab. And we're going to create a new group. And the very first thing is we want to give it some extra resolution and some extra angles. We're going to do that using the Extrude Mesh node. So let's grab that. We're going to set the offset scale to 0. And we're also going to grab a scale elements node. And connect the top to the selection here. Set the scale also to 0. And you will see that we've basically done the operation poke faces, but in geometry nodes. We're going to do that once more. So let's just copy this node, put it over here, and also copy this node. And again, connect the top to the selection here. So now we got a nice and detailed mesh, and the path that is going to be traced can take a lot of angles here, which is very important. The next thing we want to do is convert this from a cube to basically an upside down cone shape. And the equation we're going to use is x squared plus y squared. And we're going to check if it's greater than z squared. So let's get a position node. And we're also going to get a separate xyz node and connect these up. Let's square both components by getting a math node and setting it to power. And set the exponent to 2. Connect the x value and then copy it and connect the y value. Let's copy it once more and connect the z value as well. Then we're going to add x and y together by just getting another math node and adding them. Finally, we're going to get a greater than node and connect these two values. To visualize this, let's get a delete geometry node and put it over here. And let's connect the value to our selection. As you can see, we already have a sort of circular cone, but it doesn't look quite perfect. To fix it, let's get another math node and set it to multiply. And let's see which value gives us a nice upside down cone. Let's go for 3.2. There we go. That's a pretty nice cone. We can go even further by adding a float curve. With the float curve, we can control the shape of the cone. So we can make a cone like this, which goes up like that. Or we can do the other way around. For now, I'm just going to leave it here. I don't really have to change it that much. This is mostly for customization purposes and you can play around with it later. Going back to our geometry, we want to add a merge by distance node. And the next step is isolating this point right here. And we're also going to pick a few points over here at like the top of this cone. And with the shortest edge path, we're going to calculate some random shortest paths to these points. Firstly, let's isolate this vertex right here. We can do that by just grabbing another position and separate XYZ node. I'm just going to copy this one and put it over here. And let's add a compare node and set it to less than or equal. It's already at 0, that's perfect. So if we connect it up, this result will give us this vertex at the bottom. Next node we're gonna add is an edge path to curve node. And if you connect it up, you'll see that everything disappears. Don't worry, it's gonna come back. The second node we need is the shortest edge path node. And this result is gonna be our end vertex. Let's connect the next vertex index to the edge path to curve node here. Now that we got our end vertex, we gotta specify some start vertices. Let's first isolate the top part of this cone, and then in that top part we're gonna pick some random vertices. We can do that by getting a vector math node, and we're gonna set the vector math node to length. Let's pull this down a little bit so we have some room, and we're gonna connect the position to this vector math. Then we're gonna need a regular math node, and we're gonna set that to greater than. And since it basically checks in a sphere like this, let's set this to, let's say, 0.99. That way it will just get vertices like this, but we will also get some vertices here. Connect the value to the value, and let's plug that into our start vertices. And there we go, it's starting to look like a tree shape, but it's now picking every point in this selection here. Let's fix that by adding a random value node. And another math node, and we're gonna set this to multiply. And let's connect the value to the value over here. If we now pull this value down into the minus numbers, you will see that only a few points get selected. Let's put it to minus 365. This way we only have a very few. Now this way we have very few endpoints. So I actually want to pull this down a little further. Let's go for 0.85. Yeah, that's a little better. Now this mesh has been converted to curves, but they're looking very square and angular. We can make it a bit more dynamic by playing with the edge cost input over here. Let's create an edge vertices node. And we're going to get another vector math node. I'm just going to copy this one. And this one time I'm going to set it to distance. And I'm going to plug these two vectors in. I'm also going to get another math node and just set it to add. And I'm going to add nothing at this point and just connect these up. This is so I can customize it a little bit. And let's connect this value to the edge cost. And there we go. It's looking a little bit better. Obviously it's not smooth, but it's not like all blocky and stuff. And yeah, we can play around with this value to get some different shapes. Let's set it to 2 for now. We can also change this later. And the next thing we want to do is actually sample and fillet these curves so they actually look smooth. We're going to do that 2 times. So let's get a fillet curve node and put it over here. We're going to set it to poly. Now the radius is way too high and therefore it looks very much messed up. So let's pull it down until there are no mistakes anymore. Let's put it to 0.03 and then we're gonna up the count a lot. Let's put it to 150. It's already starting to look a little smoother. Let's resample this curve by getting a resample curve node, and this way it's starting to look a little more random, but still it's looking very angular. So we're just gonna fillet it once again. This time I'm gonna lower the count to 20 and up the radius a little bit. Again, we want to be careful to not set it too high because you'll make these kind of mistakes. And if you'll see these later on, you will know why. You just have to lower the radius on your fillet curve node. It's starting to look pretty natural. I'm pretty happy with this shape. So let's go on with the rest of the nodes. Just gonna organize this a little bit so it looks a little nicer. So yeah, the next step is converting these curves back to a mesh. We're gonna use a curve to mesh node. And we're also going to add a curve circle. It's important that you add a curve circle and not a mesh circle. Let's set the resolution to 16 and connect this to our profile curve. And you'll see that it looks like a mess. This is because the radius is way too big. So let's also get a set radius node, set curve radius that is, and put it over here. It already looks quite good with the radius of 0.005. But we want to create a custom shape. We can do that by getting the spline parameter node. And we're also going to get a flow curve, which is my favorite node. And let's connect the factor to the value over here. We can pull this out a little bit so it's a little bit easier to work with. And let's create a custom shape. Let's create a hump over here. Pull this down a little bit and this down here. And let's quickly just connect this to our radius. Again, it looks all messed up, so let's pull this out a little bit. Add another math node. put it in between here and set it to multiply. And let's multiply that by 0.03. So it looks a little weird. You can see that there are holes over here. You can fix that by clicking fill caps. And it's also not really looking all that good in terms of resolution. We can fix that by getting another resample curve node, putting it behind the second fillet curve node. And let's resample it about 100 times. Looks pretty good. I'm gonna just tweak the float curve a little more. Maybe put this one over here. This can go a little less. Yeah, I'm quite happy with that. You will have branches intersecting with each other like this. You can fix that by just getting another seed from the random generator here. So let's try it out and see if we can get a nice shape. Maybe something like that. This is pretty cool. And actually I'm spotting a tiny little mistake over here. This is probably due to our fillet curve radius being too high. So let's just bring it down a tiny little bit. Yeah, 0.012 seems to do the trick. And if we want to now grow this shape, we can get a trim curve node and put it after our resample curve over here. And if we play around with the start value, we can see that it grows like that. It's pretty lovely. So to get it to look more like a fractal, we want to have this shape, but have it repeat on smaller scales. That is basically what a fractal is. And to do that, let's just quickly copy what we have here and put it over to the side. We're going to change this later, but we want to basically keep the same geometry nodes group so we don't have to keep copying things over. And we're going to add a instance on points node. And for now, let's connect this curve output to the points input over here. Next, we're going to get an object info node and select our copied object. Now, I don't think it matters, but to be safe, I'm just going to select this, our main shape instead. And let's connect the geometry to the instance. Next, let's pull this out and create a join geometry node. Connect those up and let's see how it looks. Alright, so it's now instancing on every single point of the curve, which we don't want. We can select the endpoints by getting an endpoint selection tool. And we're gonna just set the start size to 1 and the end size to 0. Connect the selection to our selection. And now we can see that it actually outputs on the endpoints only. But the rotation still doesn't work. We gotta fix that. Let's get a curve tangent node. And we're also gonna get an align Euler to vector node. Let's set it to Y and connect our tangent to the vector right here. If we now connect this rotation output to the input right here, you will see that it is actually aligned, but it's offset by 90 degrees. We can fix that very quickly by just getting a vector math node. We're gonna want to add 90 degrees to the X field right here. 90 degrees is about 1.57 radians. I'm simply gonna use Google to convert it because I'm lazy. It's basically this number. This is fine. So they are aligned right now, but you can see that they're kind of hovering above this little part right here. We can fix that by just getting a transform node, putting it over here and just pulling it down on the Z-axis a tiny little bit. For now, we're just gonna ignore that these two shapes are the same. We're gonna fix that later. The thing we wanna fix next is actually when it grows like that. You can see that when it turns, it's very jarring like that. Like it turns very rapidly and it doesn't look good. And we're gonna fix that. Let's pull this entire field down a little bit so we have some room. And we're just gonna get another resample curve node and set the resample count very high. Let's set it to 2500. We're gonna connect this output to the curve input right here. And we're gonna get another trim curve node. Connect this up and then use this value instead of this value. If we now just simply get a value node and connect it to the start values of both trim curve nodes. If we now connect these two up and start playing with the value, you can see that it now turns much smoother. Now the next thing we want to do is just scaling down the instances on the endpoint. Let's do that by going to the instance on points node and scale it down a little bit. Let's do 0.45. That's looking pretty alright. And now we're actually going to change this shape so it looks a little different. And we're also going to create a third shape that's going to be on the end of these points. The reason I waited so long is because now we have pretty much the whole geometry nodes group. And we're going to duplicate it and make a new one. This is so that the two groups are separate and I can go around and changing this without this one being affected. Now let's play around a bit with these values. I'm going to give it a different seed. We can also maybe go back to the beginning and change this float curve I put here. Yeah, that looks pretty cool. Yeah, I like having it a bit narrow like this. You can of course also change this value, making it more narrow. There's a lot of options actually. And if you like the shape but there's too many endpoints, remember you can always pull down this value to just delete some random values here. There we go, this is a pretty good shape. And now we're gonna add a third instance on the endpoints of this shape. Let's just duplicate this shape and move it over here. Select our second shape, go to the object info node over here, and just select the third plane over here. Let's move it out a little bit so we can actually see what's going on. And yeah, it's starting to look pretty cool. We can go to our third shape over here and just change the seed if we want to, so it looks a little more dynamic. And for this one, let's make it a little less narrow, maybe like that, and let's delete some more endpoints. To save on performance, we can also change the resolution of this curve. We can do that by going to the final resample curve over here and pulling down the count. Maybe set it to 10. And we can also go to the curve circle here and maybe put this to 8. Now to animate this, we want to animate this value over here. So let's pull up a timeline. And basically I want this one to grow first, and then later this one is gonna grow, and then even later this one is gonna grow, and they're all gonna stop growing around the same time. So let's start with the first one. Set the value to 0.999, because if we set it to 1, it will actually go upside down. We don't want that, so as close to 1 as we can get is fine. Insert our keyframe, and let's set the second keyframe at 200. Then for this one, let's set our first frame at 200 as well. This is going to be the end stage, might be a little bit confusing. And let's set the start at 70. Again, 0.999. This is fine. Let's set our keyframe. And then for this one, pretty much the exact same. Let's go to 200, insert a keyframe, then go to 120, set it to 0.999, and then insert our keyframe. I'm gonna set this to frame dropping and let's see what happens. Okay, I definitely missed a frame over here. I don't know what happened. Yeah, okay, I forgot to actually set a different keyframe. 1 second. There we go. Let's see what happens. Yeah, I like that. We've got a nice growing animation. You could probably make it look a little better with the graph editor, or make it ease out a little bit. You know, classic animation stuff. I'm not gonna go further into it. We're gonna work on the material. So right now, if you go into wireframe mode, you will see that there are multiple tubes intersecting each other. You can see it quite well if you turn on wireframe. Here you can see that there are multiple meshes inside each other, and I have a fix for that, but it has some pros and cons. The pro is that when you do fix it, you can use subsurface scattering. But the con is that you cannot use the factor of the curve to make a material. I'm first going to show you the material without the trick, then I'm going to teach you the trick and show you a material with subsurface scattering. So let's turn off wireframe because it's kind of annoying. I'm going to go back to geometry nodes because we need to store a named attribute. Let's create a store named attribute node and set it after our trim curve node over here. We're going to name this Neuron. Next, we're going to take a spline parameter node and we're going to input the factor. Now, I pretty much should have done this before duplicating the node group. So we're going to just select these two nodes. Press Ctrl C and we're going to place them here as well. And for the last one, there we go. Next we want to add a set material node for every iteration. We're going to do that after the curve to mesh node, but before the join geometry node. So let's put one over here, then put one over here as well. And lastly, for the third one, put it over here. Let's pull out a new tab and switch to material view. And we're going to begin with the first one and create a new material. Let's call it Neuron 1. And we're going to quickly go to our geometry nodes window over here and just select it. And we are going to use the attribute that we have stored earlier. The attribute was Neuron. Let's get a color ramp. And we're going to connect the factor to the color ramp here. And as you can see, if I now pull down this slider here, you can see that it goes along with the factor of the curve. Now we can do the same for the other two. So let's just grab this material and copy it, call it Neuron 2, select it, and do the same for this one. I'm going to set this to HSV and we're going to create some nice color gradients. Let's start with black at the bottom. And we're going to go maybe this color. Add another one at the end. Let's do this, maybe a little purple. And we can actually press Ctrl C on this color. Go to the second one and just paste it over here. So the starting color here is the same as the end color over here. Now for this one, let's go a bit more vibrant, maybe a little more blue. Copy this color and go to the last one. And then output it at the end. And let's go all the way to white or maybe blue for here. Like light blue. And actually, let's have some fun. We're going to create another color ramp. Set this to, or this to black. Maybe this to white or maybe this color. We're going to create some emission. Let's check it out in shader. Yeah, that looks pretty cool. Let's see how the animation looks here. Yeah, that's pretty sweet. Okay, so this is the first method. I'm gonna show you the trick on how to do proper branching next. Just be aware, you will need a hefty PC to do this. If you run Blender on a low-end PC or a laptop, Blender will probably crash and you will not be able to use this function. But for those who do have a good PC, I'm gonna show you right now. Let's just join this back so we have our geometry nodes. And we're gonna go to the very first node group over here. Actually, to keep this one, I'm just gonna duplicate this and move it over here. And we're gonna edit this one. Let's copy this group so we're only working on this one. And what we're gonna do is firstly we're gonna pull out this set material because we don't need it at the moment. Next node we want to add is a mesh to volume node. Now you're probably wondering where has the shape gone? We only see a little ghost. If we go in this view, it's a little more clear, but it still looks a little weird, right? Don't worry, we're gonna fix that. But first we're gonna add a volume to mesh node. Put it over here. And we can already see a shape coming through. But still, if we go to the X-ray mode, you will see that they are intersecting here. This is because we actually haven't realized these instances. So to do that, let's get a realize instances node. And let's put it before the mesh to volume. Okay, so now it's one continuous shape, but it looks like a low poly broccoli. Doesn't really look that good. And to make it look a little better, we're first gonna pull down the exterior bandwidth to 0. And the next thing we wanna do is greatly increase the voxel amount. And this is what's gonna be very hard on your PC. Let's put it to 2500. So we have our shape back, but if we look up close, it's looking a little chunky. Firstly, what we're gonna do is add a shade smooth node. So we're gonna pick the set shade smooth node and put it over here. Already a little better, but it's still looking kind of bad. We can go over to our modifier tab and add a smooth modifier. I found that the factor of 2.5 and then maybe repeat it like 4 times. That works pretty well. It looks much better. You will still see that it looks like a little wrinkly, but if you put a material on it, the effect will be much less noticeable. To get our geometry nodes back, we just want to select it over here. We're gonna just put this set material node over here, and we want to create a new material for this. So once again, let's pull out a new tab over here. Get a little window here so we can actually select it later. Go to the shader editor And we're going to create a new shader. This one I'm going to call Neuron V because we're using the volume to mesh node. And here's when we run into the problem. It's looking a little flat, and that's because it can't use this Neuron attribute. We can't use the attribute for the factor on this object. But what we can do is use the subsurface scattering. So if we put the subsurface up, let's go to rendered view, we can see that it actually works. If we will do this with this one, so let's connect it and see what happens. If we would do it with this one and go into cycles view, we will see why it doesn't work that well. Here, where they all intersect, it's much too dark. And it really looks very bad. And if we go to this shape, it actually looks correct because it's actually not intersecting here. Subsurface scattering is actually light rays going in, and then they scatter here and spread out diffusely. But because there are multiple layers, it doesn't really know what to do, so the light gets trapped in between here. But yeah, obviously we don't want it to look like one flat color, so how are we gonna fix that? Well, I have a solution. It doesn't work quite as well as using the curve factor, but it still looks good. Let's get rid of this attribute node, and instead we're gonna grab a texture coordinate node. Next we wanna add a vector math node, and set the vector math node to length. Let's connect the object to our vector. Next node we want to add is a map range node. Let's connect the value. And let's now connect the result to our color ramp. Now you might think, why is nothing happening? It's actually because we haven't selected this material over here. So let's do that. Yeah. Wait for a little bit because it's a difficult shape. So how it works now is it's basically calculating the distance from the starting point over here. And then it's going out spherically like this. And since it's inverted, we're gonna also invert these 2 points. Maybe something like that. And with the map range node, we can actually extend this gradient a little bit. So let's pull this maximum up. It's a little easier to see in the material preview. Yeah, so we can add a few more points. So we can actually have this kind of color scheme. Let's go to this one, copy this color, and give it to this one. And then finally, let's grab this blue color. Oh, let's grab this blue color and add a final point. Let's increase this a little bit. Yeah. And of course, we can also add another color ramp. Let's get rid of these. Pull this up. Since it's set to HSV, let's just set it to RGB. Connect our result and put this into the emission. Just like that. So yeah, it looks pretty similar, but obviously you can see here that these are a bit closer to the starting point than these points right here. So they would not look the same perfectly like this. But what we do have now is the subsurface scattering. So we have that effect that light is going in it and scattering and spreading out diffusely. This is great for something like a plant or like skin. So yeah, that concludes our tutorial for this Neuron Fractal. I hope you liked this tutorial. I really enjoy using the shortest edge path nodes. I think they're great. Let me know if you've made something cool with them because there are so many possibilities with them. I saw Bad Normal's video yesterday of turning anything into a tree. I was so amazed. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Leave a like on the video if you find this useful. Again, get the node group for this and the mushroom and the worm in the description. It's on my Gumroad, which is online now. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.